You're listening to another great podcast in the MyMac Podcasting Network.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the show where we take a wander around the week in Apple news, reviews, technology, associated products, and all sorts of other things that catch our eye. This is another episode of the Essential Apple Podcast. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Essential Apple Podcast. And this week, Uncle Tim made a joke after Donald Trump messed up his name and basically changed his Twitter handle to Tim Apple. The US Senator Elizabeth Warren wants to break up big tech companies. The German teen hacker has relented and given Apple the secret to his keychain hack. The Google Zero-Day Group have found a vulnerability and dubbed it the Buggy Cow. And Zuck has claimed that Facebook wants to change and had a dig at Apple to boot. To talk about all of this, I am joined by All the Things and Mac to the Future Go livecast host, Warren Sklar. Welcome to the show, Warren.
Hey, Simon. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
It's not a problem.
It's great. It's great to be back. Great to be back.
Very good. Well, I guess we should start with the big Apple story of the week, Warren. Tim Cook is now Tim Apple on Twitter after Donald Trump messed his name up. Well, I thought that was very good, actually. Very clever, very subtle. And of course, it's not Tim Apple, is it? It's Tim Apple emoji, Apple logo emoji.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, very subtle. And I did notice after he did that, there were some other tech people picked up on the joke and followed his lead. Unfortunately, I should have bookmarked them, but I didn't. The only one I can track down now is the CEO of Box, who has similarly changed his name and replaced his surname with a box logo, the box emoji. But there were some others. I saw some others. There we are.
Yeah, it was. Some people are saying that he did it on purpose, Trump, because he did it, I guess, a year ago with somebody else. But there's no way he did it on purpose. That this was a Trump thing to do, and it was brilliant.
There we go. So that gave us all a good laugh anyway. That one. And it's all over the webs, absolutely everywhere. Everybody started having a go about it. So there we are. This week, Apple released their 13th supplier responsibility report, which I have to say was very good. Massive improvements in reduction in underage working, bonded labour, lots of other good things. It's the Supplier Responsibility Progress Report, apparently. Child labour has been cut down to one underage worker who was found to be a 15-year-old who'd faked his ID to get a job. They have, I believe they found only 287 workers who were, in effect, had paid to get a job and then had to work that debt off. 287 is still too many, obviously, but I believe a few years ago that was sort of in the thousands, so massive reduction there. Overall, very good. It's I think it's good. I think it's good that Apple produced this report. The only downside, of course, is it's self-reported, so we have to take their word for it. But I think it's very good of them.
Yeah, they a couple of years ago the press was pretty hard on it. There was a lot of child labor, a lot of bad working conditions. There was even a story that they had to install some kind of net outside the building from people jumping off of it to prevent suicides.
Yeah, in one of the factories, yes, I believe they had to install one of those anti-jumping nets like they put in prisons to stop people jumping off
Exactly.
the roof or whatever.
But Tim is that's his background, so that's one of the areas where you would hope to see this kind of improvement in supply chain and conditions. So it's not a bad thing, and people still will complain about the working conditions, and Apple uses this kind of labor and bring to America, but it's easier said than done to do all that, and if the interim solution is to improve the conditions there and make that country's employees healthier and happier, then it's a start.
Yeah, I mean, I think what a lot of people tend to forget is that these factories, in Shenzhen, Foxconn, and the other companies, they might not pay particularly well by Western standards, but locally, they pay very well. People, it's not like people are being forced to go there. People are very, very keen to get jobs there, particularly young people are often very keen to go there because they can earn relatively, while they live in dormitories and eat in, communal canteens and whatnot, and maybe that's not fantastic, they can earn proportionately a very large amount of money. So, it's proportionate. And they've got a chart in this report, by the way, by Apple's own standards in 2014. It says here 14% of their supply chain was considered to be of a poor standard by Apple standards. 26% were considered to be high performing. Last year, 76% are considered to be high quality, and only 1% were found to be low performing, which I take to mean below Apple's standards. So there we go. That's a good. If
Definitely
you want,
good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good improvement. I mean, that's down.
So Apple will still, Tim Cook still likes to do that artificial low availability trick when new products come out, and that's something people were hoping he would fix. But nope, that's the trick to get people to want it more, is make very few units available on launch for a product that people want, and make people want it more.
Well, that's just marketing. That's
Yeah, yeah.
that's all part of the social engineering of marketing, isn't it? That is. There we go. What else is in here? There's a piece about environmental gains. Apple continues to make big progress. The company says all of its final assembly parts for the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, the Apple Watch, the AirPods, and the HomePod are now zero waste to landfill, which is pretty good. And they claim to have reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the supply chain by more than 46,000 annualized metric tons, which is.
I think that ties into the buggy cow story.
Yep. Yes. 30 of their suppliers have apparently made a commitment to going 100% renewable energy for making Apple products. That's up from a handful, and a big deal. Apple powers its offices and stores with 100% green energy, but the supply chain, which accounts for the company's carbon footprint, continues to lag. Well, yeah, because that's not directly under Apple's control per se. There we go. So that was their report. Link to that on Cult of Mac in the show notes, although I'm sure you can find it other places. What else? Oh, Federico Vitici of Mac Stories released 150 free shortcuts for use in the Apple's Shortcuts app. If you're a user of the Shortcuts app, are you a Shortcuts user, Warren?
Here and there, I look through these lists of apps, and the one I really want is not here. Is I want one that's going to message my son every 10 minutes to do his homework. And I tried to make one myself, but I can't get it to trigger every 10 minutes. So right now, if I do it, I made a Siri shortcut that just says homework. So if I say, hey, S word homework, it will message him to do his homework exclamation point, but I need to figure out a way to make it happen every 10 minutes. But other than that, yeah, other and maybe a serious suggestion on his phone to do his homework. So it's got potential. So, but other than that, I've played around with it. There's not a lot I've done with them, but it's certainly interesting to play around with it. It's gotten more involved. You can do more things every day, which is great. So
Yep. I must admit I've not really even dabbled with it. I don't really do anything at the moment that I really feel I need to automate or shortcut. However, Frederico is of course heavily into relying almost purely on his iPad, and he's very heavily into Apple scripting and shortcuts and all sorts of automation.
there's a couple websites out there as well. I don't, we could probably find some that will also have shortcuts that you could get from those websites. So there's repositories now. People start putting their shortcuts on different websites, and I think in the shortcuts app, there's also people submitting their shortcuts there too. So they're kind of all over the place if you want to play around with them.
Yep. I believe so. But anyway, Frederico has created an archive, and he is giving away 150 shortcuts that he has devised for his own use, I guess. Link in the show notes, of course. This one is hadn't heard much about this one, which is the teenage security researcher slash hacker who said that he'd found a vulnerability that allowed him to create an app which would steal passwords from your keychain. Has relented and says that he has given Apple the secret to that hack, and dropped his call for payment, and said that he would merely like an explanation regarding the lack of a Mac OS bug bounty program. The only link I could find for this was on Apple Insider, to be honest. Basically, he said that this is too important to keep to himself. I have to say, realistically, I think Apple have to count themselves fairly lucky that he is. Oh, his name is Linus Hens. I have decided to submit my keychain exploit to Apple, even though they did not react, as it is very critical and because the security of Mac OS users is important to me. I have sent them the full details, including a patch, for free. There we go. There we are. So good on him, I guess.
Well, yeah. The only thing I want to say about that is, what he says is a security vulnerability may or may not be. So, I mean, Apple hasn't said anything, and he released some kind of video about having it happen. But, I think a lot of people think that there's a problem with software, and in the end of it, it's either maybe a specific issue with his system or user issue. I mean, I'm not saying it is, but you never know. It could be, and that's what a lot of these Mac vulnerabilities are. These things discovered by security researcher in blah blah country. It's not like something that it's out in the wild. It's not like the average person is seeing it, with the only exception of the FaceTime bug that came out. Most of these articles that you read are like that. It's very generic, and it's basically a security researcher found something that will affect this on a Mac, and then you never really hear about it again. But in any case, yeah, it's good that he tried to get Apple to to respond to his requests, and it puts him in a better light that he decided to go ahead and share it anyways, and hopefully he gets something for that.
Yeah. I guess he's shared it with Apple, which is good. I do think it would not do Apple any harm if it turns out, they don't have to tell anybody about how it was done or whatever. But I think if it turned out, after their examination that they considered it is a genuine, dangerous vulnerability, that he's shown them how to patch, that perhaps they ought to give him something. It is very strange that there's no bug bounty for Mac, and yet there is for iOS. That's still something that baffles me.
Yeah.
It just baffles me, that one.
Definitely. I had no reason why other than iOS is more popular, I guess, or maybe it was just something that was introduced after around when iOS came out, and they just didn't backtrack it. But yeah, it is strange.
Yeah, it is. I've heard a few people postulate that there's no, maybe there's no Mac bug bounty because, back in the day, Apple were promoting that like there's no need for a bug bounty because there are no bugs in Mac OS. But if that's true, it's a bit out of date now, and about time they did something about that. And following on from that, actually, Warren, there is the buggy cow. This is on Business Insider, and relates to what you were laughing about earlier. This is the Google 0 Day group. They're actually called Project Zero, I believe.
Project Zero.
Yeah. They uncovered a Mac OS security flaw, and named it Buggy Cow because it exploits the copy on write. They have uncovered a rare security flaw for Apple's computer operating system, Mac OS. Google's team uncovered the previously undisclosed bug and gave Apple 90-day deadline to fix it before going public. Apple did not respond after 94 days, and the team posted it in the exploit in a forum post, nicknamed Buggy Cow. Apple then promptly fixed it. Some people are kind of implying that Apple weren't doing anything about it because they couldn't be bothered, and then when Google went public with it, perhaps we better fix that. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I mean, copy on write is pretty deep down in the stack, so I'm not sure that that's something you could fix with a 5-minute patch. There we are. It's fixed now.
I didn't actually realize that. I knew they had the 90 days deadline, but I didn't actually. I didn't read that they actually revealed it. And again, I'm looking at the reveal of it, and it's, as you said, it's way down into the file system, and I'm sure. Again, I'll say it again, but it's it's a very minor. With rare security, researchers find a rare Mac security flaw. Again, it's one of these things. People in lab code in some foreign country discover something in the code that doesn't really affect anybody or hasn't affected anybody. So again, it's.
I find, of course, a lot of these things, the headlines often, security. I mean, no vulnerability is good, but then again, no code is exempt from having bugs in it. Also, quite often these things are revealed as if they're huge. I mean, there's obviously some flaw in the implementation of copy on write, which I guess means it could be exploited, but
it's all. I mean, it's all relative. I mean, Windows computers, thousands of Windows computers get infected daily, and thousands of them are having their data encrypted by ransomware every day. And there's no, that's not a headline anymore because it happens all the time, and it's not news. But one possible rare security flaw that nobody experienced that was discovered. That's a headline. So it's it's relative.
It's all proportional. So Scott Wilsey, I sent this one to me. Wired have a story about a clever tool which makes use of Apple's video game logic engine to protect Macs. And he found this on Wired. This was intriguing, actually. Basically, the developers have exploited the power of the gameplay kit to build a kind of monitoring tool rather than relying on a simple list of malware or whatever. Game Plan is a tool that watches for potentially suspicious events on Macs and flags them for humans to investigate. I just thought it was a good bit of out of the box thinking, effectively. As he says here, the gameplay kit takes care of evaluating events and spinning out actions. In Pac-Man, by default, the ghosts are hunting the Pac-Man, so that's a rule. If Pac-Man eats a power pellet, the ghosts then run away. That's a rule. So realise that Apple has done all the hard work for us in the game logic engine. And this can also be used to efficiently process events on the system to spit out a warning. So it's a sort of sideways thinking,
It's been done now. It's been done before. War Games in 1984. It was done where they associated gameplay with computer behavior and tic-tac-toe and nuclear weapons and all that good stuff. So
yeah,
it actually seems similar. Like the theory is definitely similar to what that movie kind of, in a loose sense, kind of took into as far as how thinking is kind of learned thinking of a computer, the first AI, I guess.
I mean, as the bloke, what's he say here? Basic security compliance is not very sexy, but it's one of the things that it's really important to know. I just thought it was an interesting way of going about it. What he's saying, Apple have built this game, this game logic kit into the Mac, and basically you can use that as an engine to write software, system monitoring software, which is a clever way of going about it, I guess. One of those kind of things where somebody has just had has been struck with a eureka moment. Your imagination is the limit. He notes that it is easy for both Digita and Game Plan users to write their own rules or combine rules into rule packs which customers could choose to deploy on their systems. Obviously, I'm pretty sure he's not actually, not suggesting that this be packaged as a consumer product. I think it's aimed more at corporate and security, monitoring companies. But Scott found that, and I thought that was a very clever use of exploiting something Apple have built for a completely different reason. There we are.
Yeah, definitely.
Ming Chi Kuo, I don't normally follow his stuff, but he has claimed in a piece that he has a good idea how Apple's purported smart glasses are going to work. He says here that Apple's first augmented reality glasses will rely on the iPhone in order to work. Sorry, Ming, but I could have predicted that. That doesn't take a great deal of insider knowledge to figure that one out. He claims that the headset could go into mass production as soon as Q4 2019 or as late as Q2 2020. Well, okay, coming soon.
Not here yet. Coming soon.
Coming soon. According to him, the iPhone will handle the heavy lifting when it comes to the computing, rendering, and internet connectivity, while the headset itself will serve as a display for integrating digital imagery into the real world. To be honest, I've been saying that for a year or more. Other than he's apparently got a good record of predicting stuff, I don't see anything special about that prediction.
Right.
Go
ahead.
I've been a big believer that Apple will produce some AR glasses. Most people who've listened to me know that I'm a big proponent of that being the next big thing. But also, I've said several times, Apple won't go there in the usual manner until they can produce something that doesn't look stupid. Nobody wants to go around looking like a Borg or with one of those huge, looking like they've got bloody safety goggles on. The sort of things they made you wear in chemistry at school. There we go.
I have a Oculus Go So I mean, the difference there's two ways to do it as far as the VR headset is. One is like the Oculus Go, which has most of the it doesn't require an external device. It has the actual Android operating system built into it. It's a standalone device. Whereas other VR sets either connect to a Windows computer or something similar that does a processing, and then it's mainly a display. That's what Min Chi Kuo is kind of saying, that it's going to be the second, the
Yeah.
latter one. But the watch was, the Apple Watch was also the same thing, where everything kind of happened on the phone at first, and then they kind of opened it up where you could actually start installing things directly onto the watch. So eventually, that's where they want to get to, where the glasses contain most of the computing to do what you need to do without the need of something else. But yeah, I mean, I'm I've said it before too, is Apple and Samsung and whoever is going to find whatever way they can find to physically attach a screen to your brain. Whatever they need to do to get their content and their devices in front of you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're going to do. And this is the next logical step. So should be interesting. Should be interesting. That's it.
Yeah. You know, like, the thing is, you do have these two different levels, which I think is really important to distinguish. You've got your VR, like your Oculus Go or Rift and various other things, which are designed to be completely immersive, aren't they? And ideal for gaming or teaching scenarios, or the one that they've displayed at one of the keynotes where they had the 3D game development, which they showed, where
Yeah.
where the developer puts on a full on VR rig, and then can effectively be inside their own 3D game as they develop it, and that is a really interesting technology, but I think it's suited very much to vertical markets or very specific niches.
Hmm.
I
Yeah, no, I see it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, VR, VR is an immersive system. Movies, is also good on there too, but AR is going to be more for integrating that with real life, and the uses are going to be, hopefully, is going to be very work oriented. They're talking about factory workers, using it to see when they're working, to see diagrams, things like that. You could see it for doctors who are using it to look at notes or something, or whatever, to not take your eyes off what you're doing. But that's the goal, to have these things on your face and to actually be doing things in the real world, and to have something that increases your knowledge or notifications of what you need to be doing in front of your face without taking your eyes off what you're doing. So that's the I think that's what that's going to be the killer app for it, is basically for working environments rather than entertainment. It's not going to be a gaming console.
Oh no,
It's not going to be a movie console like VR's. It's going to be a work and life assisting device.
yes, I think it's as I've always imagined it. I'll be honest, I've always imagined it to be the sort of typical sci-fi heads-up display kind of assistive technology. So yeah, I mean the most obvious one is directions, rather than being on your phone. You can literally see the arrows, telling you follow this path.
Yep.
Notes,
Even
being able to call up notes or whatever, as you say. So I think that's going to be a really big thing. People, a lot of people are still poo-pooing it, but then again, people poo-pooed the smartwatch or even the smartphone. I really do think it's going to be a very big thing, but it won't be a
Yep.
big thing until the technology can not look stupid and also can manage basically at least 8 hours a day, which I'm pretty sure is why he's saying, it will be powered by the phone to begin with, because otherwise you'd never get the battery life. I mean, for work and specific work principles, I could see it being there where, because you wouldn't necessarily have to get all day life out of them, would you? For specific tasks. But
Right.
I'm pretty sure the long term goal is to produce something that has all day battery life, and also, yeah, as I say, it doesn't make you look like a Borg.
Yep. Yeah. Even though a couple of years ago, people wearing Apple watches were seen as kind of British too. So now it's sort of the norm. So we adjust. Life adjusts to it, and if they look crazy but they look stupid, and all of a sudden everybody starts wearing them, then they don't look so stupid. Sort of the same with the AirPods. When we all started, first started wearing the AirPods, and we were the first ones, which I love. I love mine, but when I first started wearing them, people would say they look stupid. My wife would say they look stupid, but now you see them more and more, and they don't look so stupid anymore because it's technology drives fashion, and what seems abnormal at first starts to be normal.
Well, yeah, my take on that is, for example, all you've got to do is go on Amazon and look at, wireless earbuds and see how many cheap, types of earbuds you get, which are designed to look almost exactly like Apple's
Yep.
AirPods,
So,
to the point that many of them you think, how do you get away with this? That is most
exactly.
blatantly a rip-off of the AirPods. I
And if
guess.
Apple made AR glasses, you would bet that Amazon would have the same kind of thing going on there with
Yep.
with rip off Apple AR looking crappy devices out there. So
Yeah,
there you go.
cheap shoddy copies. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And pretty much the end of the Apple stories for now. Microsoft has confirmed that the latest version of Skype for Web will drop support for Safari. This is on 9 to 5 Mac, might be other places. Actually, they're dropping support for any browsers that aren't powered by the Chromium core. Basically, of course, because they've shifted Edge to the Chromium framework. Boo-hoo. I guess it's sad that they're dropping support for Safari, but if you've ever used Skype for Web, why? just get a native app.
Yeah, I
It's
never did.
compared to the Skype app, a native app. It's pretty diabolical.
I guess if you're traveling and on some coffee shop computer or hotel computer, and that's the only way to go, I guess that's it. But yeah, I'm with you. I've always used it. If there's an app available, I will generally use the app over a web-based version of it. It just works better for me. So.
Yeah. And as you say, I guess if you absolutely had to use it because you needed to use a coffee shop, web internet cafe type computer, but then the chances of it having Safari on it would be minuscule.
Yeah,
Probably forced into using Chrome whether you liked it or not.
Yep.
There we are. We've got some tech stories. The big tech story, of course, Warren, is the US Senator Elizabeth Warren says she wants to break up large tech companies. Well, I mean, she didn't mention Apple by name. She specifically mentioned, of course, Facebook and Google. But based on what I've read and what lots of other people have said, if this, if what she said she wanted to do was to go through, there is no way that this would not affect Apple. And then in another post I read, she says Apple should not be able to both run the App Store and offer its own apps. What do we think about that, Warren? Have you got any views on that?
I don't even know what the alternative would be. I mean, so you split them up into two different companies. I don't know how that would change much. But of course, Apple and Microsoft and Google and whoever who has an app store are going to offer and promote their own apps in that app store. That's part of the advantage of coming up with an app store that people want to use. You get that power to do it. The fact that all these app stores out there aren't excluding apps that aren't written by their own company makes me think that it doesn't make sense what she's saying. I mean, it's basically an open market. They're going to take a cut of the profits from the developers, and that's fine because that's the only way we're going to have a decent pool of apps in these stores. Otherwise, if it doesn't have the numbers of people to go there and the devices and people to market and to sell, and most importantly, to sell devices that could have them, then this system will fail. This system of the App Store will fail. So, I mean, it sounds like a nice campaign thing for people who really don't understand technology and the way these things are sold. But it doesn't sound like there's a better alternative, and it doesn't sound like it makes any sense to me. How about you? What do you think?
Well, I again, at the moment with Facebook, particularly Facebook, we know it's aimed particularly at Facebook and probably Google, and the the current understandable backlash about the whole freebie thing. Thank you, by the way, Bart, for coining that one. Freebie for free with for personal information. Hashtag freebie. Look it up on Twitter, people. And I think it makes a great, as you say, a great kind of campaign thing. A lot of people are unhappy with Facebook. A lot of our people are unhappy with Google. So that, let's break up these big tech giants. It on the surface, it has, it can easily resonate. But how would you go about that? What are you going to do? I mean, with Facebook, what could you do? You could split off their messaging, or you could say, right, we're going to force you to spin off Instagram back as an individual company. You could force them to spin their messaging out as a separate company. I don't know what you would do with Google. What could you do with Google? I mean, Google. I suppose you could split.
They already did. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did it already. I mean, they split off all their, in theory, they split off all their sub companies into sub companies of Alphabet, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's one of those things that on the surface sounds nice. I'm not really. I mean, it says here these companies should be prohibited from owning both the platform and participants on that platform. Platform utilities would be required to meet a standard of fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory dealing with users. Platform utilities would not be allowed to transfer or share data with third parties. Well, fine. We're all for platform utilities maybe not being able to transfer or share data with third parties without your consent, for sure. From Apple's point of view, what would you do? I mean, I would look at it and say, well, Apple, if they were put in that position, surely they could simply spin the App Store off in the same way as FileMaker is a freestanding company, despite effectively originally being part of Apple. And then what are you going to do? You're going to say, right, well, we're going to make you split the Mac, the Mac part of the business into its own corporation, or the iPhone. Despite what people think, I mean, the Mac section of Apple would still be a large company. Might not be, the size of the iPhone division, but it would still be a large company. And the only the real danger would be I guess, if you said, okay, you have to spin out the App Store and also allow other app stores to be available, to iOS, which would be a bad thing, I think.
I mean, yeah, again, and I'm not sure what advantage you would have of splitting off. I mean, we've talked about this before from a consumer perspective of Apple splitting off the Mac division from Apple. would be an exciting thing probably for us consumers, because the thought was we talked more about this a couple of years ago when the Mac line was really stagnant, and we're like, okay, what do they have to do? And if they split it off into a separate company, then maybe they'll go ahead and put more research and development into this stuff, and we'll get some exciting Apple hardware Mac products. So from a consumer perspective, that's great, but from a economic and political standpoint, I mean, Apple's going to get the money either way. They're still going to be a parent company, I think. They're still going to, they could call themselves whatever they want, but it's not like the money's going somewhere else at that point. And essentially, this is what, when a business does well and becomes big, they become big, and that's economics. I mean, I guess what's happening is people are coming up to her and say, Facebook's sharing my data. They're too big. Nobody could stop them. So, she's like, oh, okay, well, why don't we make them smaller, or, make sure they're not so powerful. Again, if you had a better idea of, if you had a solution, then say the solution, but just to say they're too big, we got to break them up and stop there, it's not a solution. It's just a theory. It's an idea.
It's a nice. It's a. Well, I don't want to get too much into the politics of it, but to me, it sounds very much like it's a great, platforming, grandstanding kind of comment, isn't it? It's I'm going to build
Exactly.
it's in the same vein as I want to build a lovely wall, and it'll be 30 foot high and 2,000 miles long.
Yep.
It whether you agree with that or not, it's a grandstanding, headline grabbing, attention getting kind of platform, but does it have any real meat behind it? I think there is a lot of backlash, but most of the backlash in reality comes down to the whole freepie concept. People don't like their personal information being hoovered up and sold off, or weaponized against them without their knowledge or consent. I think realistically, certainly in the US, or I mean, we've got GDPR here in the EU, but globally, really, what is needed is better regulation of what companies can do with the personal data they collect. That's the truth. I mean, Benedict Evans tweeted the idea that Facebook would be killed by owning, unbundling, fragmenting, or federating your data reminds me somewhat of the widespread idea in the late 90s that open source in general and Linux on consumer desktops in particular would kill Microsoft. In that it's a great, it's a great slogan, but it often doesn't pan out that way in real life.
Yep. And from the privacy and from Facebook, definitely, privacy is an issue, and definitely getting the data out. And what's been happening is people say, well, we can't do anything because Facebook is too big, too powerful. There's no alternative. If people don't, people will say, hey, if you don't want your data getting out from Facebook, don't use Facebook. And people don't like that answer for whatever, for obvious reasons, and the reasons are because it's one of the few places that if you want to do something like Facebook, you have to use something like Facebook, and that's it. So in theory, in a utopian world, if you make Facebook less powerful, and then there's other providers that could come up and do same things, and not be so big and not need to make so much money and not sell your data, then that's what they want to get to. But in reality, everything starts like that. Facebook started like that. And you get to a point where like, okay, well, we got all these people and we need to make money or else we're not going to be here anymore. And how do you make money? And the options are advertising, the options are selling things, selling hardware, and the option that seems to be working is to share data with advertisers for for product placement, and that's Facebook's thing, and that's Amazon's thing, and that's probably even Google's thing, and it makes money, and people don't like their data being shared, but people like Google, and people like Facebook, and people like Apple, for that matter. So it's not going to change, and even if it did change and a small company came up and started to be the new Facebook, after a few years it's going to be the real Facebook. It's going to be
It'll be the new Facebook.
it will be the new Facebook, and then they'll want something, then we'll say we'll want something new, and that's how it's going to keep going.
Yeah. I remember when I was a small boy, talking about this sort of thing. My father said if you divided all the money in the world equally amongst every single person on the planet, the chances are within 2 years it would have ended up back in the same situation where 1% of the people own 90% of the money, because that's just how economics works.
Yeah. If you have something to provide, then you get the money, and if you don't, then you don't. And that's how the world is. That's how money works. That's how wealth works. People get rich generally for reasons, and the reason is you have something to offer. If you don't have anything to offer, then you're not going to get the business, and if you do, then you are.
Yeah. I'm not saying that nothing should be done. Obviously, Tim Cook has said that there should be more government regulation. The problem with government regulation is that often governments have no idea how to go about it, and then they go and do stupid things. They use sledgehammers to crack walnuts, or drill holes in the bottom of the ship to let the water out. There we are. But I don't know what's to be done, and I'm sure people much cleverer than me are still struggling with what's to be done. But I don't think a kind of let's just break big companies into smaller companies would achieve anything. Certainly wouldn't achieve what they think they want to achieve.
And again, if we were politicians, and we could stand up and say anything, I want Google to not sell your, to not take your data anymore. Well, I could say that, and that would be my campaign promise, but it doesn't mean anything. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. And how do you achieve that? Yeah. How do you achieve it? And there we are. Obviously, on that front, of course, there are there are people, there are companies who are attempting to, market themselves on a new model. There is a certain section of the tech community who are beginning to say the way to defeat this kind of freepy model is simply to go back to an old-fashioned selling you a service model. Andy Yen described it as, I believe he described it as privacy as a service. So, Proton Mail basically market themselves on, yes, you pay us a fee per month for your email, rather than getting it for free. In return, we promise you that it's encrypted and private, and nobody is hoovering up your data whilst you use the service. And there are several other companies that are, pitching themselves on that premise. So it could be that simply if enough people get the hump with the whole sucking up your data to power their economic engine, people will return to saying, well, I will pay. I'm prepared to pay a few dollars a month to have email that doesn't monitor what I do. I will.
Yeah, not a lot though. People are cheap.
People like free, don't they? People like stuff for free.
They definitely like stuff for free, and a lot of people out there will, if Facebook's decided to charge to not do a lot of things they're doing now and decided to charge even $1 a month, I bet they would lose half their subscribers, for that little amount of money, because just people are cheap, and people do not want to spend money on things that they don't really have to. And Facebook, internet sites are one of those things that they could forego, and they know that. But as far as, like things like Proton Mail that are selling the security thing, I just find that funny too, because there's all these VPN companies out there, and VPN's a great thing, and I have Nord myself, but again, I don't know, I don't know what Nord is, I don't know who they are, and here I am just paying them some money and sending all my data through them. So there's a level of trust in there too.
There
That
is indeed. There is indeed. It's something that's, we've expressed over and over again. And yes, as VPNs have come into the kind of public eye, it's been revealed over and over again that these cheap VPNs that pop up saying, get a lifetime of protection for just $10 or whatever, are mostly not actually much cop at all, if not actually hoovering up your data for their own purposes. So yes, you do have to have some trust. Following on from that, I think we'll just cover the Facebook story, I think, Warren, and then maybe we'll take a 5-minute break for John Nemo, and then we'll come back and cover the last couple of things. But while we're talking about Facebook, of course, Mark Zuckerberg put up a large post saying about how Facebook is going to pivot to be more privacy focused. Now, of course, if you read that carefully, he's only talking about their messaging systems. So, which of course he wants to amalgamate into one conglomerate messaging system behind the scenes. He's saying they're going to offer encryption and ephemeral messaging and all the other kind of things that everybody else says, makes your messages private. TechPinions had a piece on this, which was described as Facebook's transition to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And of course, the thrust behind that is if we were even to take, Mark Zuckerberg's protestations about his design to pivot to a privacy-focused vision for social networking, then he, creates a schism, if you like, within the two parts of Facebook, where you have a messaging section, which allegedly is, secure and private and doesn't hoover up your data or monitor what you're doing or all the rest. But then you would have the other part of Facebook, which continues to exist by hoovering up all your data and selling it to advertisers so that they can target you. And eventually this would create a Jekyll and Hyde situation. It's an interesting read. It's not particularly long. Links in there. It's on TechPinions by Ben Baharan. Did you read that at all, Warren?
I read a couple of these stories, and it's my understanding that what Zuckerberg's saying, that he wants to consolidate all the messaging apps, or all the message. He wants to encrypt the conversations in the messaging portions of the Facebook-owned apps is what's happening. So for Instagram and for Facebook, as far as messages go, it's going to be, he just wants to make it more secure, and he wants to ensure, quotation marks, the users that this is the most secure way to communicate with each other, and to be sure that we are not selling your data, or doing anything with that data. Probably more of a rib to Google, who's been known to kind of read through your Gmail conversations and target ads based on your Gmail, and might be also trying to be trying to compete with iMessage in a sense, where people are pretty comfortable with iMessages being encrypted and pretty secure and safe. Then I also read something where, like, they maybe even want to get, they're eventually kind of stop doing like the wall thing of Facebook altogether, which doesn't make sense to me. Basically the news stories, the wall, things like that, which is basically the main feature of Facebook, or maybe even split that off into a different, two separate platforms. There it is, I guess, but you could use Messenger you could use a Facebook Messenger outside of Facebook, but you can't go the other way. So maybe completely splitting the two, where Messenger is not even associated with the Facebook pages.
I, I mean, as Ben says, there's a cynical and an optimistic view to take here. I have my doubts Facebook can pull this off as one entity. We have to applaud them for recognising the damage to society that has happened because of Facebook and their attempt to help change things for the better versus continuing business as usual. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't trust Mr. Zuckerberg. He comes across all the time and portrays this sort of little boy lost. I didn't understand what was going on and how all this could get out of hand. And we really want to do the right thing. And then, they continue on down the same path regardless. I'm afraid I have no trust in the man at all, or the creature he has created.
And that's what he's trying to reverse it. So he's trying, he's using almost political headlines to try to convince people that, we're going to change the inherent security values of Facebook. And I don't think he is either. It's going to stay the same. They still have to make money, so, his best bet at this point is to be completely honest and fully transparent of what the intentions of his products are doing. And I think that's the best way for him to go. And, again, if Google and Facebook come out and say, listen, this is how we make money, this is how things happen, and we're going to continue that until we find another revenue stream, then that's and you could use it if you want to use it, and if you don't want to use it, that's his best defense at this point for people to continue using the service.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Google and Google Mail is that when they started Google Mail or Gmail, they were quite open about the fact that in exchange for this free service, your messages would be scanned for keywords, and that would be used to put adverts in the sidebar. I haven't used Gmail for, I don't know, some while now, but they used to, used to get those little sort of like adverts in the sidebar, almost like classified ads. I think they stopped doing that some time ago, to be honest. But even Google, and I don't think this really got as much coverage as it deserved, is Google actually said, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to stop scanning your email for keywords, partly because they discovered it was no longer really viable because people don't use email in the same way as they did back when Gmail was launched, and partly just because of the negative PR they were getting for it. So they don't actually do that anymore. They hoover up your data in all sorts of other ways, I'm pretty sure, but they don't do it by reading your email. And then, of course, Mr. Zuckerberg also put up a post where he, it's described here as paints a biting contrast between Facebook and Apple on privacy by saying his company has sacrificed business in order to protect its users. The link I've got here is Business Insider. You can probably find it elsewhere. This actually made me laugh. Like, I actually outright laughed at this. He didn't actually mention Apple by name, I'll be honest. What he said was, Mark Zuckerberg appeared to criticise Apple by saying, we won't set up data centres in countries with poor human rights records. And this stance has caused us to lose business. It's a trade-off we're willing to make. Now, the implication here, of course, is that Apple set up a data centre in China so that it could continue to offer the iCloud services after China mandated that Chinese users' data had to be stored on servers owned by Chinese companies. But basically, it's a trade-off we're willing to make to protect our users is a farcical, absolutely farcical comment, because it's disingenuous at the very best, because Facebook is banned in China. The Chinese government does not allow Facebook. It's as simple as that. They've been blocked since for 10 years, I believe. Somebody here said this is a massive shot across Apple and Tim Cook's bow. No, it's not. It's just farcical. To be honest, Mr. Zuckerberg and Facebook have repeatedly approached the Chinese to try and find a way to get into China, and the Chinese government are just not having it because they won't. So to claim that they're somehow holding the moral high ground over Apple there is farcical. It actually made me laugh out loud. It was so. But I guess a lot of people who don't follow this stuff could be taken in by that sort of. Well, let me call it balderdash, as this is a clean show.
Works for me. It's a nice British term, I guess, right?
Yeah. Horse feathers, as Mr. Chaffin might say.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've got any comment to make on that one, really, Warren. I mean, I just found it farcical, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it is true, but I mean, the counterpoint, I guess, if I have one, would be if Apple didn't put the data center in China, they would be banned from China as well as Facebook, because China is China. It's not a great look for Apple that they had to put their own. They had to put a server in China. I think they also had to do it for Russia not too long ago. But it's business is business, and you put in your safeguards to make sure nothing crazy happens, and you try to get your product out there. And as you said, Facebook would love to get into China, but I don't think there's anything that they convince the Chinese government that they could make their service China approved. There's nothing they could do. It's the very purpose of Facebook is information sharing, which is basically against what China wants people to do there. So it's not going to happen for them. But yeah, it's a good opportunity for Zuckerberg to say, "Haha, we don't do that." Well, yeah, you can't. So there you go.
I mean, the thing with Apple is, Tim Cook said he wasn't particularly happy about it, but the Chinese had made those the rules, and it's their football, so shut up or go home. And the option was effectively, set up a data center in China, run by a Chinese company, or close down the iCloud service. Well, if you close down iCloud, then there's nothing particularly special about an iPhone or any Apple product, is there? iCloud is an integral part of what makes the Apple ecosphere work. So, I guess Apple also have a little more clout than Facebook because obviously, all that Apple kit is assembled in China.
Right, that's the other problem. I mean, they can't just pull out of China because they got factories there, and you kind of want to have a working relationship with the country that is building your products, and it'd be a mess to move them out. So I think so. I guess in your opinion, if they didn't have the factories in China, and Chinese government came to Tim Cook and said, and Apple and said, you need to put a server here. The question is, do you think he still would have done it? If he didn't have the factory?
I think he still would because China is a huge market. And, I don't think Apple could afford to forego selling Apple products in China. What I'm saying is that they have lots of Apple factories in China or Chinese factories relying on Apple production. That's a double-edged sword, if you like. The boot swings both ways, as it were, because Apple can't afford to upset the Chinese and be kicked out of China, but at the same time, I suspect the Chinese can't afford to overly upset Apple because if push came to shove and it would be difficult, Apple could move production to places like Brazil or India or, Malaysia. There are other places in the world that might not be, as integrated or as efficient as, getting their stuff produced in Shenzhen is right now. But
or America,
yeah,
which people want it in here too, but it's not easy. It would be like like forklifting out a huge operation out of something that's took years and years and years to perfect and get working. It would be a huge undertaking for Apple to move that factory
oh
to
yeah,
any other place,
anywhere.
anywhere.
I'm not suggesting that it's something that could be, it would be very damaging. But
Oh yeah.
when you have a big business relationship like that, it would, if the Chinese push too hard, then Apple could begin to gradually start pulling their manufacturing out.
For all we know, they are. For all we know, they started that process, and it wouldn't be the stupidest thing in the world for them to actually like silently, quietly, making something somewhere else, because you can't really put your eggs in one basket, especially when your basket is China, which is not the easiest place, especially nowadays with the political system going on there. It's not the best place to have stuff being made for you.
Yeah, I mean, I know Tim Cook has in the past said about producing iPhones in the US, for example, and has said that the big, it's not only that the cost of the labour would possibly be prohibitive, but also that you don't have the pool of, you wouldn't actually have a pool of enough skilled people. I mean, I think it's difficult for people to grasp just how huge China really is.
Yep.
And that they can dedicate, a province the size of a country and say, this is the Shenzhen manufacturing zone, and put all these different factories that are all integrated. So you've got chip making there and circuit boards there, and you know what I mean? I don't think it's easy for most of us to just grasp how huge that is. It's but there we go. Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Warren, I'm going to grab a cup of tea. And I think we should take 5 and go over to John in the Nemo's hardware store, and we'll be back in 5. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, take it away, John.
There's a new audio company called Helm, Helm, and for $100 in black or in white, you can get the Helm Audio True Wireless Headphones, full Bluetooth left and right, in-ear, fairly substantial headphones that fit snugly into your ear with a little tiny rubber extension to make sure they stay in place. The sound quality is very good out of the package. They come fully charged. They hold their charge for a few hours, and then you can charge them up again in the case, because the case has a battery, which is easy to charge up using any USB plug brick or source. Terrific Bluetooth wireless range, so you don't need to be anywhere near your iPhone or your iPad while you're out exercising out in your yard or around your property or around your school, wherever you happen to be. It's a good long distance. Be very careful when you first turn them on, because I have found it makes much more sense to turn them on and off with them out of your ear. You'll see that on the written instructions that you get, because they fit so snugly that the ear tip, the part that inserts into your ear canal, easily get pressed in and damage your ear. Don't do that. Turn them on and off in your hand. You'll be able to hear them tell you that the helm is on or the helm is off. The pairing is a little tricky at first until you get used to the timing of turning the right one on, then turning the left one on, then pairing it to your device, and giving a chance for the right and the left to communicate with one another. You'll figure that out. For $100, these are good value. They come with several different tips, so you will definitely be able to find one that fits your ear. They're water resistant, not waterproof. They've got the built-in mic for phone calls and voice assistant, FaceTime and stuff like that. Rain, sweat, and mud approved with IPX4 water resistance, outstanding noise isolation from the physical fit in your ear. You can't hear much of anything. So don't ride these bicycling on the road, please. They use Bluetooth 4.1, and you can read all the specs and the links that we will have on our show notes. I was very impressed as I listened for the first and second time. Clarity, the bass, and the overall uncolored accuracy of the sound. I think that will only get better with the more that I listen to them. The case itself is a nice little egg-shaped case. Very, very well designed. They've put a lot of thought and care into these $100 premium quality, but not premium price, full Bluetooth wireless earbuds. So have a look at the website, follow the links, give it a try. I think you will be very pleased. This is the third or the fourth or the fifth set of these true wireless headphones that I've tried. Some of them sound good, but they don't feel right. They slip out of my ear or they're uncomfortable. Others feel fine, but the sound is crummy. These are the ones that I'm actually going to use and recommend personally because of the great fit, the good design, the fine audio, battery life, amazing Bluetooth range. So well done, Helm Audio, on your introductory product. And let's have a lot more from you in the future. That's it for Nemo's Hardware Store this week.
Thank you, John. And as ever, the links for those products will be in the show notes. Well, we've been going a moderate amount of time, Warren, so I think we'll just skim over the last few stories and wind the show up, if that's all right with you.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. What have we got? Flickr have unveiled a new login which has ditched the Yahoo system. Link for this is from Petapixel. I think Mac Jim in the Slack room brought this one up, but it's not really surprising. Obviously, when Yahoo purchased Flickr, they insisted that you have a Yahoo account in order to continue to log in to Flickr. Yahoo have sold Flickr to somebody else. I forget their name. And they, unsurprisingly, have now ditched the Yahoo login and unveiled their own new login, which allows you to switch to any email address of your choice. So
that's a good thing. I always hate it. I do have Flickr. I got a pro account a long time ago, and I guess I'm grandfathered into this thing with this pretty low price plan of unlimited full res storage. I think I pay something silly like $10 a year or something like that. But I didn't see anything as far as login goes, but I always hated logging in with Yahoo because I hate Yahoo. So that's good news.
Yeah.
So that's good news for me. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? So that was just a quick Corning. You might have heard this being mentioned elsewhere. Corning are working on flexible glass, which can be bent around I believe sort of a diameter as small as a pencil. It's not ready for prime time yet, but obviously with this possible fad of folding devices, which of course are reliant at the moment on plastic covers. And by the way, it would appear that Samsung have already admitted that their folding device starts to suffer a problem after 10,000 folds. They're talking about possibly allowing people to have free screen replacements if you buy one of their $2,000 folding prototypes. There we go. Corning are working on flexible.
How do you fold glass?
Well, it's not actually foldable. It's bendable. It's flexible. Let's put it that way. I've seen it. Well, it's super thin. It's super thin. Apparently super tough. I don't know the exact. I don't know the exact technique. It's obviously very clever indeed.
Yeah.
I've seen a photograph. If you follow the link, there is a photograph of a piece of the glass folded back over itself, and it's probably bent over what would be, I don't know, the sort of roundness of your small finger or something like that.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
So
pretty cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
not folded in half by any extent, but certainly glass has got to be better than any sort of plastic. There we go. A technology to keep your eye on, I guess, if folding devices become a thing. A company called this is about a week old. This one, Luminary, is aiming to become the Netflix of podcasts. This was on Business Insider, but it was also everywhere else. Basically, they're saying that they, want to suck up a lot of podcasts and become a paid-for service in the, in the model of Netflix. I had some thoughts about this. One is I don't think that's a very good idea. Two, they're saying they want to, get exclusives with star podcast producers. I don't know what you think about that, but I thought those don't really sound like what I would call podcasts. They sound like professional audio programming rather than video programming.
Yeah, I mean, like we said before, people are cheap and podcasts are free now, and there's plenty of ways to get them. So I know that I would not be interested in paying for a service for a podcast, especially if you could get them everywhere else. And as you said, if it's some kind of exclusive content thing, then it's not really, is it even a podcast anymore? So
no, exactly. Marco Arment, of course, of Overcast, tweeted, "They'll have to get you and me first if we all keep listening in standard podcast apps using the open RSS-backed podcast ecosystem instead of joining proprietary walled gardens. Nobody can ruin what we have." I think I agree with that, to be honest. So
yep.
There you go. If you believe in podcasts, don't go paying some stupid Netflix of podcasts company. Or if you do, if you're interested in whatever content they have, which isn't really podcasts, that's fine. But keep listening to your other podcasts the normal way. The Dutch data watchdog says nay to take it or leave it consent for cookies. This was on the register. The Dutch watchdog has said that as far as they're concerned, the GDPR does not allow websites to basically present you with a "we use cookies, I consent, and if you click no I don't," basically chucking you out. Not sufficient, according to the Dutch, and if the Dutch say that, I'm pretty sure the rest of the EU will follow that model, which means, quite rightly, no, you cannot effectively be forced to consent to cookies and trackers. There we go. It's one up for the Dutch, I think. And the web has just got an official password-free login standard, which is called Web something really stunning like WebAuth. WebAuth, really. There we go. Maybe not a very exciting story. Web authentication, aka WebAuthn, has been a de facto standard for no password web sign-in for a while, given that many tech giants already use it, but it is now official. The World Wide Web Consortium and FIDO Alliance of the USB key dongle UTF thingies have finalised the web authentication format, making it the go-to option for logging into accounts with potentially greater security and convenience than typing in your credentials. When a site supports it, you can get in using biometrics, fingerprints, facial recognition, USB security keys, or a nearby mobile device such as a phone or smartwatch. The technology links unique encrypted login details to each website, reducing the risks of phishing, keystroke logging, and other attacks. It's theoretically more private than when these same unique credentials, which prevent the across-the-web tracking. Okay, I'm not sure I read that correctly, but anyway. You don't have to wait for the software you use to support web authentication, as it's already supported on a system level in Android, Chrome OS, and Windows 10, as well as common browsers including Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and Safari. The greater challenge will be convincing the sites themselves to use this method. There are many, many web pages, and not all of them will be in a rush to ditch passwords. An official standard could still boost adoption if just by reassuring the site operators that web authentication won't vanish overnight. So there you go. I'm pleased to hear that, to be honest.
Yeah, more security, more good.
More
Nothing
good.
wrong with it.
Just need to basically, I think, give it a while, and if a site that you are a regular user of doesn't start offering it, badger them and ask them why they don't. Where else? I don't think we've got much else, so I did say that we were just going to skim over the quick stories. The last one, which is just a snippet. I don't know if you saw this, but Lego have basically kind of trolled Samsung and Huawei with an advert featuring its own foldable. They've done an advert effectively showing what is in effect. They've called it the Lego Fold, which is actually a pop-up book set, but it's been done in the style of Samsung's marketing. Lego, yeah, it is quite cute. Lego is quick to point out its foldable beats Samsung's because it has a 5-inch cover which unfolds into an 11-inch storybook screen, compared to Samsung's 4.6-inch exterior and 7.3-inch interior. The Lego Fold beats the battery life with with an unbeatable promise that it never runs out of battery. And
it's made in Denmark rather than China, so you know it's good.
That's it. Samsung's exterior is made of aluminium instead of ABS plastic, which Lego is using. It says Android 9 Pie OS promises to be more useful than Lego's seemingly single-purpose bricks, although users with experience with the Lego platform will likely be able to find new and novel ways to reconfigure things to their liking. Very good. Lego's version costs way less than $2,000 and comes in at $70. There we go.
It's actually a real thing.
Oh yes, yes, it is a real thing. It's a pop-up storybook set, which is very clever in its own right, actually. But a very clever little piece of marketing by Lego there to, and the link there, you can find that on The Verge, or no doubt you can search for it elsewhere. Lego Fold, it's called.
Maybe I have to get it.
Yeah, there we go. I think that's pretty much all of the stories. Oh, one more. I will just mention, in case you didn't know, Skylum are giving away a copy, or will be giving away copies of Photolemur 2, which is the previous version, I admit, when their video on YouTube reaches 100,000 views. I think it's 45,000 views at the minute. And if you go there, view it, and sign up, when it reaches 100,000, they will gift you a free copy of Photolemur 2, if you're interested in that. Link in the show notes, of course. And I know you've got to get off, Warren, so we'll wrap it up there, I think. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. No
problem. And so, would you like to pimp anywhere that you can be found?
Yeah, just I know we all give our opinions on Facebook, but I do spend my time there. There is a group that we have called Mac to the Future, and it's basically just an Apple-centric, technology-centric Facebook group. So you're welcome to search Mac to the Future, and if it's a picture of macaroni and cheese, it's not the right one. If it's a picture of a computer or Apple product, then that's the one. Go ahead and join. And other than that, yeah, nowhere else. Just there.
Okie dokie. Well, in that case, I am, of course, on the Twitters as @Serenak, and that's SERENAK. You can find the show at www.essentialapple.com, where we put all of our stuff. You can also find us over at mymac.com, of course. And, well, I think for now that will do. So thanks for coming on again, Warren, and this is where we go. Bye!
Bye!
You've been listening to the Essential Apple Podcast, and I'd like to say if you enjoy the show and would like to support us, feel free to go over to the website essentialapple.com and you will find links to both Patreon and the Pinecast Tips Jar, where you can make a donation towards the costs of the show, or even if you're really keen, you could set up a recurring payment. And thank you very, very much to all the people who already do support us. We really do appreciate you very much indeed. This show is, of course, part of the My Mac Podcasting Network, where you can find a variety of other shows like the My Mac Podcast with Guy and Gaz, the G-Men, Tech Fan with Tim and David, the Nintendo Club Podcast, the Geekiest Show Ever, the Three Geeky Ladies, Bart Bouchots and his wonderful Let's Talk Apple, and possibly some more that I've forgotten. So why not go over to mymac.com, take a look at the available podcasts, and take a listen.
My gal pals, Elisa, Susie, and Vicky, the Three Geeky Ladies, told me to remind you that they will release a new podcast each month. So, check them out at 3geekyladies.com or subscribe in iTunes. The Three Geeky Ladies, part of the My Mac Podcasting Network.
This has been the Essential Apple Podcast. Goodbye and thank you for listening.